What's up, YouTube? This is Angie with Roscoe Pops. This is my portion of an interview with cjramone of the Ramones. To catch the video in its entirety, you will need to subscribe to FanRoomLive on YouTube and tap that notification bell so you'll be notified when that video does drop. I also want to say a big thank you to Cody with Popular Opinion. He is the one who made all of this possible with a giveaway. Thanks, Cody.
Well, first of all, hi, CJ.
Hello.
I am so excited.
All right, where are you calling from, Angie?
I am in Kentucky.
In Kentucky, all right.
Yeah.
Where
Originally
at?
from Georgia, but I'm calling from Kentucky. We got transplanted here, but that's another story.
What city in?
Florence.
Okay.
So we're right outside of Cincinnati.
Yep. All right.
So I just want to know, when you went in to the audition, was
Yeah.
Dee Dee in the audition? Did you have to audition for him?
He wasn't at the first audition I went to. He was at one of them. I auditioned several times. There was a back and forth, over the course of several weeks. I think they auditioned. I've heard, from 45 to 70 people. I've heard, a lot of numbers. But he wasn't at the first audition, but one of the auditions that I went to, he came in while I was there. And it was, I mean, Dee Dee was my guy in the band. You know what I mean? Like, I
Right.
love Dee Dee. In fact, when I heard that Dee Dee quit the band, I was driving with a friend of mine, and they announced Ramone left the Ramones. It said Ramone today announced that he's leaving the band. He's trying to get sober and blah, blah, blah. And I turned around to my friend who was driving. And I said, I'll never go to another Ramone show. And I couldn't have been more wrong, because I went to every Ramone show. But Dee Dee came down also to a couple of the practices that I did after I got into the band, and he was always very cool to me. He was really cool to me. He had left the band. It wasn't like they kicked him out. He left the band. He wanted to do other things. He wanted to move on. He did Dee Dee King and stuff like that. So I didn't actually audition for him, but after I became friends with him, he told me, I did a really good job. He was like, you really fit in well, CJ, so it was good. It was good.
How hard was it for you to learn those 45 songs in 5 weeks?
Yeah. So, the problem is I played in cover bands, but I mostly played in all original bands from when I was young. So I didn't know a lot of covers. So when I had 5 weeks to learn 40 plus songs, the problem that I was having was a lot of the Ramones songs are similar. Musically, they're similar.
Mhm.
So I would, we were playing like Rock and Roll High School, and I'd be going into the bridge for Rock and Roll Radio, and what I mean, like I would actually get songs confused sometimes.
Rock and Roll High School is my favorite one.
All
I
right.
love that song.
Just because I had so many songs to learn, but I literally just stayed in my room for hours and hours and hours. I slept with my bass. I did nothing but play. I mean, and because I had not played my bass in a long time, right? I had been at that point in the military for 2 years. Because I hadn't even played in a long time, I was dealing with blisters and I had never played with a pick before. So I was trying to figure out a style for playing with a pick. And then once I figured that out, I had to figure out how I could play it without my forearm, like, just locking up because of how fast everything was. So
Right.
I developed this thing where I dropped the bass down low and straightened out my elbow, and then it was on my wrist. So there was all of this stuff that I had to learn and come up with and, develop in a stretch of 5 weeks. But
so rock and roll is like the Olympics, is what you're saying, because it sounds like it.
Well,
Yep.
you did an amazing job of it too. So
Thank you. I appreciate that, Angie.
not a problem.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Angie, for coming in. And again, I love that ball. I really do.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
The song Three Angels,
Mm-hmm.
did you write it?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So that,
How long did it take you? And what was the emotion behind? I mean, did the emotions get the best of you, or did you just let it flow and that's how it came out?
so I had always wanted to write a song about my relationship with the guys in the band, right? I got asked about it a lot, what was your relationship like, blah, blah, and this and that. But to compress everything that you know and have experienced and been through with, with guys that I idolized as a kid and then was in a band with and went through all that with, it was a, just a very daunting kind of task,
Mhm.
and I wasn't sure that I would ever be able to do it. I figured, maybe someday I'll write a book and I'll just put everything in there. But considering that music is a thing that, it was a thing that connected me to them and brought me into the band and everything else, I really wanted to do a song. So it kind of floated around in my head for a while, like how I could do it. And one day I had just dropped my baby girl off at school. Actually, my middle daughter, my daughter Lily, I had just dropped her off at school, and I was driving home, and all of a sudden the lyrics just like started popping into my head. So I was a little ways from home, so I just pulled the car over. I reached into the back seat. There was a crayon on the floor that my baby girl left there. I found a receipt that was on the floor of the car, and the lyrics literally came out in like a stream of consciousness that was bizarre. So I had heard songwriters talk about that. Billy Joel, I'm from Long Island, and Billy
Mhm.
Joel's from Long Island. So, growing up, I listened to Billy Joel. I was always very aware of him, and I listened to an interview with him one time where he said, all my best songs come to me in one, just come out. Like there's not a lot of thought,
Right.
right? So, you know, I think this is the first time it ever really happened to me like that. And so I pulled over and I wrote down the lyrics. And as I'm writing down the lyrics, I suddenly hear the music, and it was just such a strange experience. It really was. It was really like it was already written in my subconscious,
Mhm.
and it took like a moment of like not thinking about anything for it to slip into my conscious mind. So I literally I went home. I picked up my acoustic guitar, and I didn't play the whole thing all the way through, but I played a good portion of the song through with the cadence for the lyrics and the chord progression, and I had it was all in there. The entire song was done in probably an hour, like literally in an hour. It was just like boom. And I think what I tapped into there, and I have a theory on creativity and songwriting and like all and just creativity in all the different aspects, and regardless of medium. I really feel like um, when you're an artist, your subconscious is constantly working on finding a creative way to make sense of the things that happen to you in your ordinary everyday life. And then if you add on top of that, I'm an avid reader. I read a lot of books. I read
Yeah.
constantly. I always have since I was a kid. I was
I
into
do too.
poetry very young and all that. So I think what happens is in your subconscious, you have all of this stuff in there, like all your creative influences and the things that happen to you on a daily basis. And your mind just wants to make sense of it and say it in a way that it kind of like puts that to puts that to bed. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like, okay, here it is. This is it. This is what what your subconscious has been working on. And that was the first song that ever happened to me on it, and it was just such a unique experience. But
I love that song.
yeah, I mean,
Absolutely adore it. I love it.
it's so hard for me to say like, yeah, I sat down and I thought about all the important things about my relationship with each individual guy, and then I pared it down to something that would fit into a verse. None of that happened.
I'm
It
glad to
literally-
know it didn't. That makes me love it that much more, that it just flowed through the way that it did.
Yeah.
So I'm very glad to hear that.
Yeah, it's, you know, it's really cool too, like, because while I was in the Ramones writing songs to submit for albums, it was very intimidating. It was like really
I can
intimidating. I'm trying to write something that will stand up against some of the most classic rock and roll and punk rock songs ever written.
Right.
So I was really intimidated. Johnny was like, "Why don't you submit some songs?" I'm like, "John, Dee Dee and Joey are submitting songs. You know, anything I write is never going to compare to it." But then on the last record, I got a couple on. But I, you know, once that kind of pressure was off of me for writing for the band, I still felt the pressure of, you know, if I'm putting out an album as cjramone, the songs have to be good enough for me to have submitted to Johnny for an album. So that's why, you know, the Los Gusanos stuff I did, my first solo band, I used the name cjward. When I did the Bad Chopper stuff, I used cjward on that too, because while I liked those songs and I thought they were good, I never felt they would have, that Johnny would have accepted them onto a Ramones album. But by the time I wrote the songs for Reconquista,
Mhm.
I was confident enough in my songwriting that I was like, this would have made a great Ramones record. If I could hear Joey singing these songs,
I
could hear
agree.
Johnny saying, "Yeah, I like this," you know. So it just took me a couple of years after the band retired to get my songwriting chops to the point where I said, "Okay, I can put this out as cjramone. That's good enough to submit."
Angie, you got all the secrets now. Makes it that much better. Thank you so much for joining us.
Excellent question,
It was so much
though,
fun having
Angie.
you.
Thank you, CJ. It's a pleasure meeting you. Thanks, Stacy, and everybody for having me.
So good
All right.
to have you, Angie. Come back again.
Hey,
All right. Hey,
thanks.